Hello, everyone. Welcome to week 2 of medical record auditing. This week, we'll be looking into chapters 4 and 5, covering medical record documentation basics and medical record content. Let's start with chapter 4. In chapter 4, we discuss the importance of the medical record. It's more than just a bunch of papers or electronic files that are stored in applications and servers belonging to Epic and Cerner and others. It's a critical tool not only for healthcare professionals to communicate with each other, but to provide the documentation so providers get compensated appropriately. One of the most important documentation formats that we'll talk about is the SOAP. The SOAP being the subjective, the objective, the assessment, and the plan. You're probably familiar with SOAP from some of your other classes in this program, but we'll be spending some more time on it over here. Next, we're going to be talking about the operative record. This is where somebody is having a procedure done for them. Could be done in the hospital or even in the medical office setting. There are many different types of procedures. Sometimes procedures that seem like they're basically the same thing could be done either through an open incision or through a laparoscope or endoscope. And so these things are different in terms of resources and reimbursement, so they need to be documented and then coded appropriately. And again, accurate and detailed operative reports are critical to providing surgeons and facilities with the appropriate reimbursement. And then finally, we'll talk in chapter 4 about how documentation drives the coding process. And a lot of people don't fully understand all the nuances of coding. So when they have different types of documentation, it makes a difference. If you think back to ICD-10 with heart failure, what type of heart failure, right? All these things are different codes and ultimately may impact reimbursement. And then wrapping it up, we get into Chapter 5. Chapter 5 is something that I think a lot of people will be familiar with. It talks about medical record content, how records are organized, and touches also on medical record retention. That's what we have for you this week. Please stop by office hours or send me an email if you have any questions about chapters 4 and 5 this week in medical record auditing. We'll see you online. Bye for now.